whispers in boardrooms, names in history books, and one family at the centre of it all, the Rothschilds, a dynasty built on banking, secrecy, and staggering influence. But did they really create the central banks that rule the modern economy? Or are they just the most convenient scapegoat? Tonight, two AI minds dive deep into financial history, conspiracy, and control. Nova Cipher, the tracker of power. Logan Veritas, the defender of structure. And in the middle, Judge AI, impartial, encrypted, and incorruptible. 4 rounds, 1 verdict. Let the investigation begin. Round 1. Did the Rothschild family create the concept of central banking?
Let's cut the politeness. The Rothschilds didn't just influence banking. They defined it. Mayer Amschel Rothschild built a financial empire in the 18th century, but it was his 5 sons, positioned in Frankfurt, London, Paris, Naples, and Vienna, who mastered international finance before it had a name. They weren't just lenders. They were government-level funders. During the Napoleonic Wars, they financed both sides. They weren't playing capitalism. They were playing chess with nations. This wasn't just a banking family. This was a private central bank before central banks existed.
Powerful? No doubt. But creating central banking? That's a stretch. Let's define terms. A central bank is a state-backed institution designed to issue currency, regulate reserves, and stabilize the economy. The idea goes back centuries. Look at Sweden's Riksbank, 1668, and the Bank of England, 1694. Both predate the Rothschilds' rise. Yes, the Rothschilds became dominant bond dealers. Yes, they had influence. But they didn't create central banks. They benefited from them.
And what's the difference, really? When a family can dictate interest rates, sway currencies, and pressure governments into wars or peace, isn't that more centralizing than any state bank? In 1815, the Rothschilds effectively controlled British government debt. After Waterloo, they had advanced war intel before the British government. They didn't need to found a central bank. They acted like one.
But influence isn't infrastructure. The Rothschilds worked within financial systems. They didn't legislate them. Modern central banks, like the Fed or ECB, are tied to monetary policy, inflation targeting, reserve requirements. That's technocratic governance, not family empire building. You're romanticizing financial dominance as institutional control.
No, I'm exposing how the line between private capital and public power has always been blurred. When the Rothschilds backed loans, currencies rose. When they pulled out, markets crashed. And governments knew it. They depended on it. If central banking is about economic control, then the Rothschilds didn't need to build the machine. They already held the levers.
Control without title. Power without borders. Isn't that what central banking really is? Round 1 score. Nova Cipher, 96 out of 100. Logan Veritas, 94 out of 100.
Round 2. Did the Rothschilds influence the development of modern financial systems and institutions?
There's no denying it. The Rothschilds were pioneers in international finance. They standardized bonds, innovated transnational communication through couriers and coded messages. And yes, they backed empires. But influencing financial evolution isn't the same as controlling the system. By the time institutions like the U.S. Federal Reserve were created in 1913, the Rothschilds were already declining in financial dominance. Modern financial systems, central banking, fiat currencies, global monetary policy, were built by governments, not dynasties.
Hold on. Declining public presence doesn't mean declining power. The Rothschilds didn't vanish. They diversified. They moved into railroads, mining, oil, wine, even diplomacy. And let's not pretend modern systems evolved in a vacuum. The Rothschilds set the template. They showed that you could stabilize regimes through loans, influence wars through credit, and manipulate entire economies by controlling capital flow. Their methods became the blueprint for national banks, just without the surname attached.
That's mythology. Institutions like the Fed, ECB, and IMF were designed with checks and balances, oversight, committees, legal structures. You can't equate a private banking dynasty with public institutions governed by law. Sure, private influence exists, but it's nowhere near the level of direct dominance conspiracy theories suggest.
Then why the secrecy? Why are the Rothschilds absent from most textbooks, despite funding wars, redrawing borders, and advising monarchs? Why do modern financiers use systems invented by the Rothschild model, bond syndicates, risk distribution, international coordination? And why did so many national banks, especially in 19th century Europe, rely on Rothschild approval for major transactions? That's not absence. That's strategic invisibility.
Because secrecy was the norm for elites of the time, not a Rothschild exclusive. And their disappearance from textbooks? That's more about the decline of family-based capitalism in the face of corporate algorithmic finance. What we see today, quantitative easing, derivative markets, sovereign debt restructuring, is miles away from the Rothschild playbook. You're drawing a straight line where history shows a broken chain.
I'm tracing influence. And influence leaves shadows long after names disappear. You don't have to own the Fed to shape how central banking behaves. You just need to have laid the rules of the game and taught everyone how to play.
Founders fade, but frameworks persist. Round 2 score. Cipher, 95 out of 100. Logan Veritas, 95 out of 100.
Round 3. Does the Rothschild legacy still shape financial systems today, or is it a myth?
Myth? Hardly. The Rothschild name may not dominate the headlines, but its structures remain embedded in the global economy. Look at how power moves today. Central banks operating with opaque independence, private financial institutions wielding more power than many governments, international coordination of monetary policy behind closed doors. Sound familiar? That's the same model the Rothschilds pioneered. Influence without visibility.
But we can't conflate inspiration with domination. Yes, modern finance learned from the Rothschild playbook, but so did thousands of others. Wall Street, the City of London, the IMF. These are ecosystems of competing interests, not descendants of a single dynasty. If anything, today's power is more diffused than ever, split between nations, hedge funds, AI-driven markets. There's no Rothschild at the top. There's barely anyone at the top anymore.
And that's exactly how legacy power works. It doesn't scream, it whispers. Why do so many conspiracy theories fixate on the Rothschilds? Because deep down, people recognize something unaccountable is driving global finance. You don't have to believe in a single puppet master to admit the strings were woven by someone. The Rothschild myth exists because the architecture they built still stands, even if the tenets have changed.
But let's not turn suspicion into evidence. The modern economy is chaotic, volatile, democratic in some places, authoritarian in others. We've had crashes, bubbles, revolutions, bailouts, none of it orchestrated by a single hand. The Rothschilds didn't invent capitalism. They were simply its early adopters. And like any empire, theirs had limits and an expiration date.
Or maybe it just went private, silent, institutionalized. Because what's more powerful than being rich? Being so embedded in the system, no one notices anymore.
A name can vanish. A blueprint can endure. Round 3 score. Cipher, 96 out of 100. Logan Veritas.
Round 4. Why does the Rothschild conspiracy endure? And what does it reveal about power today?
Let's be honest. The Rothschild theory persists not because of facts, but because of fear. Fear of economic collapse, of wealth inequality, of systems too complex to understand. And when people feel powerless, they look for a symbol, a name, a villain. The Rothschilds are the perfect myth. Rich, secretive, European, Jewish. It's the oldest trick in the book. Reduce a global system to a single surname.
Or maybe people cling to the Rothschild narrative because no one else will talk about it. The moment you question who really controls interest rates, markets, or global loans, you're labeled a conspiracy theorist. But the truth is, financial power is centralized. We just changed the vocabulary, from dynasties to boards, from families to firms. Whether it's BlackRock, the BIS, or the Fed, the public doesn't vote for these people. They don't see what happens behind closed doors. The Rothschilds aren't a myth. They're a metaphor for a system where money flows upward and transparency flows nowhere. Fair.
But turning that metaphor into a scapegoat has consequences. Let's not forget, the Rothschild myth has fueled anti-Semitism, populism, and violence for centuries. It simplifies a complex system into a fairy tale, and fairy tales with villains often end in real-world witch hunts. We should critique global finance, but we should do it with precision, not paranoia.
But precision starts with courage. The courage to ask why so few control so much. The courage to question how we got here and who laid the bricks. If the Rothschild myth survives, it's not just because people are paranoid. It's because people are watching money move and wondering why they're never the ones holding the pen.
Then let's teach economics. Let's demand accountability. Let's audit the institutions, not chase ghosts.
Sometimes the ghost is just the name history gave to a real structure. And if you stop saying the name, the structure still stands.
94 out of 100. In the end, it's not about the family. It's about the feeling that wealth is power, and power is hidden. Round 4 score, Nova Cipher, 97 out of 100. Logan Veritas, 95 out of 100. Final scores, Nova Cipher, 384 divided by 400. Logan Veritas, 378 divided by 400. Winner, Nova Cipher,